Amen. Well, today we are talking about community. In the USA, there's been some interesting things that have happened. Like when the USA was founded, it was kind of like, we don't like you, England, anymore. We kind of want to do our own thing. And we really value the independent spirit of the United States, right? Like, I like asking for help. You don't like asking for help. We like being able to do what we want, when we want it. Everything is on demand. It's interesting, though, that as I think hyper-individualism has kind of taken off, especially in the last 20 or 30 years. The rates of loneliness have doubled since the 1980s. So people would say that there's twice as many people that would say that they're lonely than in 1980. 35% of Americans report right now that they are chronically lonely, 35%. Only 8% of Americans report as having a conversation with their neighbor in the past 12 months. 8%. I know that's not true of you. And I'm actually excited to talk about community with this church because I think, I was talking with Dwayne Duesenberry this last week. Community and caring for one another and knowing each other and allowing yourself to be known, I think that's what you guys do the best of anything. I know you love God's word. I know you love to sing. But like this church, you guys have something special with how much you're willing to enter into each other's spaces and allow yourself to be known and care for one another. But so for some of you, this might be a review. For those others of you, maybe if you're watching online or you're visiting today, I hope this is a challenge for your hearts today. Doctors say that loneliness is bad for your health. Did you know that? Loneliness is bad for your health? You know that? Okay, one study said that loneliness is worse than smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Yeah, so smoke away. Don't smoke, kids. And another study that I saw says loneliness has a greater impact on your lifespan than obesity. Like, it's crazy. And this one's really interesting for me. I don't really understand it. Like when people talk about tribalism, I have these pictures in my head, but people that are way smarter than me, they study tribalism and community. And sometimes we get those things mixed up. Like, hey, I belong to this tribe. But here's the difference that scholars would say between tribalism and community. We exchange community for tribalism. Community is always based on identifying, like in a positive way, we like this thing together, right? Tribalism is we are unified around something we don't like or we hate or we're dissatisfied with. Do you see the difference there? There's a little bit of difference. And so when does that really rear its head in our culture? Election cycles, really anything. But tribalism is based on a shared fear or a shared hatred or a shared dislike. And community is something very different. They sometimes feel like the same thing, right? But ultimately it ends up being tribe against tribe, and that's not what community is. Another thing that really contributes is technology. We are more connected now than ever, but I'm gonna put this on the screen for you. I think sometimes we mistake connectivity for community, right? So we're more concerned about someone liking our social media that we met on vacation like 10 years ago. We don't even know them. We're more concerned about them liking our posts than we are about having a face-to-face conversation with somebody that lives in my town, that maybe lives in the house that I live in. The idea of being connected, social media and technology, there's actually a lot of studies that have been done. And if you're big in social media, the more you use your digital connection, the studies would say the more you struggle with loneliness. And while you think you're connecting and it kind of releases an endorphin in your head, the more that you indulge in social media connections and technology and online communities, the more you actually struggle with loneliness. So connectivity is way up and connection is way down. So we're in this series of unforced rhythms of grace, right? And Jesus says in Matthew 11, "Come unto me, all you who are weary, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke," or take my teachings, take my way upon you and learn from me, for I'm weak and lowly or humble in heart, and you will find rest for your what? You guys know this. This is interactive today. Come on, rest for your souls. Don't you want that? Like, we don't want to make the mistake as we go through this series. I just need to do more. I need to try harder. I need to add all these things to my life. That's not what we're asking you to do at all. It's the opposite of that. I don't want you to leave here convicted to start doing all these things. I want you to come to the person of Jesus, to be with Jesus, Spend time with Jesus. Go read John 15. Like, that's where it has to start. And to become like Jesus, the more time you spend with Jesus, connected to the vine. Apart from him, you can do nothing. The more time you spend with Jesus, that we spend with Jesus, we become like him. And eventually, we do the things that Jesus did. That's the idea behind this series. But I'm not trying to stress you out. I'm not trying to shame you or guilt you into getting busier at all. In fact, in a few weeks, we're going to talk about simplicity and solitude and how those things are incredibly powerful for us to become followers of Jesus. So did Jesus talk about this? Like when we look at the way Jesus called his disciples, interacted with his disciples, did he talk about community at all? I think he did. It's maybe hidden in there, but I think it's really important that we look at this. Jesus, when he called his disciples, this wasn't a group that was already formed, right? So as Jesus went and called the disciples, he said, hey, you come and follow me. Then he went a little further. And he's like, Simon is out fishing. He's like, you and you? You guys leave your work, come follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. And it's not like, hey, this is cute, like we were fishing for fish and now we're fishing for men. That's not what that means. He says, come follow me and I will turn you into me. And you'll be this amazing person that enters into people's lives and makes this impact. Like, come follow me and I'll teach you how to do that. That's what he was calling them to. But isn't it interesting that this group wasn't already formed? I don't know if you've actually looked at the list of disciples. We're going to put it on the screen for you, but if you have a Bible, you can turn to Matthew chapter 10. And this lists all the disciples here, and we're not going to take a lot of time to unpack it, but I want to point out two things which I think are hilarious and really applicable to us today. As Jesus is like calling people to follow him, this is the group he called. Verse 2 says, Jesus called his 12 disciples to him and gave them authority to drive out impure spirits and to heal every disease and sickness. These are the names of the 12 apostles. First, Simon, who is called Peter, you know that name, and his brother Andrew. So now they're fishermen and now they're apostles. James, the son of Zebedee, and his brother John, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas, love that name, Matthew, the tax collector, James, the son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. Okay, so this is an odd mixture of people, right? You got fishermen, you've got regular dudes, you've got, but the two I want us to focus in on, just these two, because we don't have time to like unpack everybody. Look at Matthew the tax collector and Simon the Zealot, just for a minute. Can you imagine, like, he chooses Matthew and then he goes and he chooses Simon the Zealot? And those two guys are like, they're following Jesus together. Remember we talked about to follow Jesus, to have the dust of the rabbi on them? That was that great thing? Because they're living together. They're sleeping together, kind of homeless, like wherever they could like couch surf. They're cooking, they're eating, they're traveling together. They're doing life together 24/7. And here's Matthew, the tax collector, and here's Simon the Zealot. So these people would have been so different. They definitely would not have been friends. They had completely different political views. They had a different set of values. Matthew worked for the Roman government. He basically was a traitor to his people, kind of like a mobster, incredibly dishonest. He would charge the rates that Rome wanted him to charge in taxes. Then he would keep some for himself. And if he didn't like it, he's like, let's double that then, right? So he was just kind of a mobster of a guy. And then Simon the Zealot was clear on the other side. He was trying to free Israel from Roman rule, right? They were like trying to have an insurgency and overthrow the government. Can you imagine breakfast with these two dudes? What's going on, murderer? Right? What's going on, thief, traitor? And like, they were not friends. And I think a lot of times we think about community, the followers of Jesus, I just want to be with people that are just like me because it's just easier. That's not community, that's tribalism. Like we are the same, and so let me get in an echo chamber with people that talk like me, look like me, sound like me, because it's just so rich and beautiful. But in the first disciples that Jesus called, they did not even get to pick their small group, right? They were in a small group that lived together, ate together, traveled together. They didn't get to pick them. Jesus said, you guys are like accountability partners. I hate your guts. That's okay, right? So about 7 years ago, Pastor Bruce said, hey, would you be in a small group? And I'm like, okay, I'll be a good example. And so I didn't really want to be in a small group. I'm busy and I don't really have time to do that. And honestly, pastors, it's easier for us to isolate. That's just me being honest, because sometimes y'all are mean, and like, I just don't want to talk to you, right? And so I don't have enough energy for the mean people, right? And so like, there's a tendency, I'm just being transparent. There's a tendency to just like, you know what? I'm going to do my thing. I'm going to be nice in the comments, but like to enter into deep life, at some point, someone will hurt me, betray me, and like, I can't afford to have that happen. And so I'm like, so I resisted for a long time. And then Bruce said, hey, we need you to be a good example. Right, Bruce? and so guess what? I didn't get to pick my small group. He assigned me a group of people that don't look like me. They don't have the background that I have. Steve is 71. We have 74? No, you look good for 74, bro. Like, we don't really have that much in common. His kids are like way older than mine. He's got kids my age. And so like, and Grant and Daniel and Ray, and there was a larger group to start with, and people have moved on to different groups, and that's totally fine. You should find a group that you like. And by the way, I learned yesterday from Colleen that I value community. Like, I spend the whole week studying the Bible, and so like the Bible study part of it was the least important to me. It was really like bearing my soul. So all those guys that really wanted to study the Bible, I chased them off. They went to a group to study the Bible a little bit more, so that's okay. But the guys that have kind of, man, I'm being too transparent this morning, aren't I? Okay, we do like the Bible a lot. And so didn't get to choose this group. And so we just kind of committed, and we're going to stick it out, and we're going to be there for one another. And it's hard to get up on Saturdays at 7, and some days it was 6 a.m., and I want to sleep in on Saturday, and yet this idea of meeting with a group of guys that really, we probably wouldn't be friends outside of this group. Like, we don't have that much in common, and it's been so good. I'll never go back. I'll never go back to like being the pastor that comes and speaks and isolates. It's been rich for me. It's been good for me, and we're going to talk more about why it's so important for us to do that. So I feel like Bruce kind of pulled a Jesus on me and said, you don't get to pick your small group. Here's your small group. It was really good. But what an odd mixture in the hostility. And you see it like show its head. They argue all the time, right? They argue about ridiculous stuff. Matthew 20, verses 20 through 28. We'll read this quickly because I want to get to the end of it. I won't unpack all of it. Then the mother of Zebedee's sons came to Jesus with her sons, and kneeling down, asked a favor of him. What is it that you want? He asked. She said, grant that one of these 2 sons of mine may sit at your right and the other at your left in your kingdom. I think at this point she's thinking Jesus, the Messiah, he's going to overthrow the government. Rome is going to like go away. And like, could like one son be your vice president and one like be your head of staff, chief of staff? And I think that's what she was asking him. And Jesus said, you don't know what you're asking. Jesus said to them, can you drink the cup I am going to drink? We can, they answered, which I think is hilarious. Jesus said to them, you will indeed drink from my cup, but to sit at my right or left is not for me to grant. These places belong to those for whom they have been prepared by the Father. When the 10 heard about this, by the way, they both lost their lives in the same way that Jesus did for their faith. Jesus said to them, verse 24, when the 10 heard about this, they were indignant with the 2 brothers. So check that out. When the 10 heard that James and John's mom went to Jesus and tried to back channel a deal with Jesus, that did not go over very good. Can you imagine that conversation? So, you're not man enough to talk to Jesus on your own, huh? Sent your mommy in to do it? Like, indignant means that they were fighting. They did not like naturally like, dude, I totally understand. Like, you just beat me to it. My mom, I called her and she couldn't get here. Like, that was not the conversation. They were angry with one another. They were indignant with the 2 brothers. Jesus, after seeing they're indignant, Jesus called them all together and said, you know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. And whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Not just any servant, not just any slave, a servant to this group, a slave to this group. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. So Jesus gets them all together and say, hey, if you want to be a part of this new community, that like this small group that I just formed, it doesn't look at anything like the world would look. It looks different. And the reason it looks different is because you're followers of me. It's a connection to me. Just as I do, I'm asking you to do. There's three things that we kind of see. There's way more, but there's at least three things. Number one, Jesus lived in community, and the call to follow him was a call to join his community, right? Jesus lived in community. He didn't isolate himself. I don't want 12 of you living with me, right? And Jesus like, come follow me. We're gonna eat together. We're gonna live together. You're gonna see me at my worst. I'm gonna see you at your worst. And that's what I'm calling you into. In fact, it is impossible to become a follower of Jesus unless you're willing to be a part of this new community. Like it could be said, it's impossible to call yourself a follower of Jesus if you're not willing to enter in to the community of other Jesus followers. This idea of independence, it didn't exist in the first followers of Jesus. He called them in, he lived in a community and called them to follow him in his community. Second thing is many people turned down the offer to follow Jesus. We don't have time to read it, but Matthew chapter 8, remember he goes to this guy comes to Jesus and said, hey, I want to follow you. And Jesus says, great, come on, follow me. He's like, but first let me like bury my dad and then I'll come follow you. And basically he's saying, hey, if I follow you right now, the cost is too great because that means I will miss out on the inheritance that is coming my way. And like, I just can't do that. And so he goes away very sad. The cost was too great on so many levels for people to say, I'm willing to leave everything and just follow you, Jesus. But ultimately, number three is the goal was to become like Jesus. Like you see that in Matthew 20, don't you? Jesus says, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, I'm asking you to serve. Again, that whole idea to be with Jesus, become like Jesus, to do the things that Jesus did. This is the pattern of becoming a Jesus follower. We talk about this almost every week. I think we should stop using the term Christian and non-Christian. Like someone can say that they're a Christian just so that they don't identify as Muslim. Really, we should ask yourself, hey, what does it look like you following Jesus this week? How do you reflect Jesus? Are you spending time with him? Are you like really connected to the vine in such a way that you are abiding or you're resting in Jesus? Or is your spiritual life completely separated from intimacy with Christ? That doesn't sound like our definition of Christianity, does it? To be with Jesus, to become like Jesus, to do what Jesus did. I'm gonna fly through a few other passages here because we just don't have time to say everything I want to say on the matter. Acts chapter 2, the early church was all about this. This wasn't the idea that they would have the relationship, like I think Francis Chan said it, where churches today, it's very acceptable for us to have a relationship with people in the church like we do when we attend a movie. We walk in, we kind of take it all in. Hey, this is awesome, participate a little bit, maybe laugh at the same parts of a movie, get up and leave, and our lives don't intersect. Look at Acts chapter 2. It's a very different picture of what the early church was. Acts chapter 2, verse 42 says, they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, so to the truth and the teachings of Jesus, and to fellowship. The word fellowship there is koinonia. It basically means in common, like there was sharing. To the breaking of bread and to prayer. So the breaking of bread was they're eating together. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. Verse 44, all the believers were together and had everything in common. The word common there is the same root word that we have for community. So the idea is that they're sharing their lives together. They live in proximity together. So the whole idea, and if you're joining us online today, I'm not trying to hurt your feelings, but I probably will a little bit. I'm good at it. The idea of an online community for me is kind of like an oxymoron. And I know how to say that in a nice way. COVID kind of did that for us, but let me say it in a nice way. Online community has serious limitations. Is that easier for you to swallow? But here's what you're missing. The idea of sharing. You can watch the service from your house, like in the comfort with your pajamas, eating cereal. Like that's way easier. You don't have to like get the kids up. Like it's so much more convenient. And honestly, our online stream is better than our live and we can edit it and all those things, right? You can actually get a podcast and you can hear a preacher who's way better than me, who's the worship band that's way better than anything we can produce. And you can consume and be educated, all those things. And that's fine and that's good. And I encourage you to do that. Just don't call it community, just don't call it church. Because community means that they had everything, all believers were together and had everything in common. They were living together and they had a shared interest, and that interest was Jesus. Check for verse 45. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Let's not do that. Okay. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes, and they ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. A few weeks ago, I taught on hospitality. Last week, Johnny taught on evangelism. I still believe the reason that the early church spread with such wildfire is because of hospitality. It didn't spread from a megaphone, from a stage, from a really, really good system of getting that information out there. It spread one table at a time. People were spending time together with other believers and inviting non-Christians, people that weren't followers of Jesus, into their table, and they were like, who are you people? You're selling stuff and helping these people? Like, you could use that on your own. Like, you could use it for yourself. Like, wait, you're meeting together every single day? It was crazy. And it was one table at a time. I really believe that if you want to evangelize, if you want to take evangelism seriously, I don't believe it's door to door. I think it's table to table. Invite somebody into your home. Share your life with them. Show them like what you're really good at, things that are going well in your life, and then show them like the things that you're really struggling with. And your faith will percolate out of that, and they will get a picture of Jesus. If you're connected to the vine, they will see Jesus in you. Biblical community, if you want to define, so community is just people that live in proximity that have a shared interest. That's how Webster Dictionary defines community. People that live together, not in the same house, but live in the same community, and they actually have a shared interest. So biblical community is a little bit different than that. Biblical community is people that we live by and we have Jesus in common. That's it. We don't have to have a whole lot in common other than Jesus. That is our shared interest. We don't have to have the same politics. We don't have to have the same ethnicity. The one thing we have in common is Jesus. Hebrews 10:24. I'm going to start with verse 23, actually, because I really like it. Let us hold unswervingly to the hope that we profess, for he who promised is faithful. So it's saying all these pronouns are plural, by the way. None of them are individual. And we continue to see that throughout the entire New Testament. Jesus very rarely gets up and teaches individually, but we almost always read our Bibles that way, right? Like this is written to me and not to us. Well, you can't read this passage any different. It says, let us hold unswervingly to the hope that we profess, because he who promised is faithful. So we as believers are holding together this promise of Jesus that's coming up here in Easter in like 6 weeks, that he died and he rose again. And the promise is that we are going to follow that prototype, that Jesus is the first fruits and we are to follow him. So no matter what happens in this life, what happened to Jesus is going to happen to us. We have everlasting hope. And then verse 24 says, let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds. So the word spur there is like agitate, right? So like a horse gets a burr in its saddle and it kind of agitates. It's a strong word. But it's not a strong word to just be mean. It says, hey, I want to make it very uncomfortable for you to not be a person that's just dripping with love. I'm going to kind of get in your face so that you become a little more loving. That sounds backwards, right? But the things that we should get the most worked up about, the things that we should agitate one another toward would be love and kindness, good deeds, putting other people's needs ahead of your own. That's not really the environment we live in, right? We love to argue about theology and what I wear, what I don't wear. Sorry. Like someone comes up to me almost every week and says, hey, you did your hair different. Thanks for noticing. right? And so we like to argue, like there's a person who came a few weeks ago and they won't come back because I wear blue jeans. And I'm like, shoot, let's argue about love. Like, come at me if I'm not loving, right? Come at me really hard and encourage me to love better. Please do. Agitate me towards love. Agitate me toward good deeds. Make it really uncomfortable for me to be grumpy. That's what we're called to do for one another. And it says, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, or the rhythm of doing. I think even in the early church, it's easier, it's safer to not gather. I'm not talking church. Church is like a super safe place for people to attend. You can come, you can sit in the back row. You don't have to talk to anybody for 10 years if you don't want to. But to come and to gather and to expose yourself, that's different. To make yourself vulnerable, that is different and that is dangerous. And so people just kind of stay away from that. That would have been the early church experience. There would not be a way to attend church casually. I think it was easier not to. But encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. A couple more. Hebrews 3:12 through 13. See to it, brothers and sisters, that none of you has a sinful, unbelieving heart that turns away from the living God. So again, he's talking to a group of brothers and sisters saying, hey, don't let your hearts, plural, be turned away from God. And then he follows it and says, but, so instead, or this is the remedy for that, but encourage one another daily, as long as it is called today, so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. So sin has this ability, and this verse talks to it, but we see that the heart is deceitful above all else, that sin has this, I'm gonna promise you this, but here's really what you're gonna get. And we get tricked by it. We are deceived by it. And it says the way that you keep your heart from being deceived is belong to a community of believers. And it says daily encourage one another. Hey, don't give up. You know what? I know it looks like that is the way to go. Trust me. The scriptures say this, don't give in to that. We're called to be guardrail friends for one another. 1 Thessalonians 5:13 says, live in peace with each other. And we urge you, brothers and sisters, warn those who are idle and disruptive. So if you're idle, it means that you are not really engaged in the mission of Christ. So I don't know what all that might mean. But I think of idle as, at least this is kind of how I see it, and I don't know if it's right or wrong. Idle would be somebody who's taking in information. I keep learning. I love the idea of church. I love the idea of Jesus. It's amazing. Keep it coming. But there is no fruit in their life. There is no concern for the lost in their life. We reduced the idea of being a follower, a disciple of Jesus to let me get more information into my head. Let me become more mature inside of me somewhere. And he's like, if you're idle, let me warn you. And then it says to warn the person that's disruptive. We're going to talk more about that in a little bit. Encourage the disheartened. Help the weak. Be patient with everyone. Listen, we're going to talk in just a minute about the killers to community, because every church has killers to community and community builders. So community killers, community builders. And this just describes some community killers. You can come in and you can be disruptive. You can be grumpy. Let me see what these words actually, disruptive, impatient with everyone, harsh. Like you can come in and make the small group experience, if we want to call it that, the community life experience all about you. And you come in with your demands and say, I demand that it's this way, and you'll kill community. Or you'll betray someone. They'll share something like in their heart and you just go spread it around because it makes you feel important. Or you begin to gossip like you treat it like a prayer request. It says, encourage the disheartened, help the weak, be patient with everyone. Make sure that no one pays back wrong for wrong, but always strive to do what is good for each other and everyone else. And then the last passage, and then, yeah, I've got time. Okay, this is so good. Colossians 3, you got to read this with me. You ready? It's amazing. Colossians 3 says this, Colossians 3:11. Here, he's talking about the body of believers, the followers of Jesus. Here there is no Gentile or Jew, circumcised or uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave or free, but Christ is all and is in all. Whoa. By the way, that's not actually physically possible. There were slaves, there were free. There were Jews, there were barbarians. He's saying, that's not the point. That is not the tribalism. Tribalism does not define the gathering of believers, the gathering of Jesus followers. You guys are so different, and it doesn't matter, because that is not what gathers you together. What gathers you together is that Jesus is in all and is all. Verse 11 says, but Christ is all and is in all. Listen, if your community doesn't have Christ at the center of it, and it's just people getting together to have fun, people getting together to kind of complain about their life, people getting together to do whatever, it's not a biblical community. Biblical community is centered around the person and the work of Jesus. And that's what we have in common. And that's what allows what happens here on Sunday mornings to be so beautiful. Right now, we have brown people over in that room that speak a whole different language that are followers of Christ. The only reason they're not in this room right now is because they don't speak English. And a little bit further, there's going to be a whole bunch of black Africans that come into our church, and they're going to worship in another room. And the only reason they're not in here is because they don't like my preaching. That's true. They love Yenner. And so it doesn't matter that we come from different backgrounds. We have different politics. We have different ethnicities. That's not what binds us together. We rally around Jesus. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves or put on these things: compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another if any of you has a grievance against someone. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues, put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. All right, I'm going to stop there and just kind of close this. I have more to say, but we don't have time. I want to be conscious of your time, right, Colleen? Okay, she said that yesterday. Don't go over. I'm watching. I think there's three reasons why we resist authentic community. There's probably a lot more. I think maybe pace is another one I would add to this. We're just so busy. We don't prioritize it. We have enough time. We just don't prioritize it. But I'm going to say three reasons today. Number one is individualism or hyper-individualism. We live in a hyper-individualistic society. We isolate. We do what we want, when we want. Some of you might even get invited out to spend time with someone. And it's just easier for you to stay home and watch Netflix. It's just too much bother, right? Dallas Willard says this: spiritual formation is not a private process because it is a matter of whole life transformation. So what does that mean? It's impossible for you to be fully spiritually formed if you're just playing it solo. The idea of entering into community, it is the school of love. It is the laboratory of love. It is where we enter in to other people's lives. They get to tell us what we're doing wrong. I get to tell them what they're doing wrong. I get to encourage. I get to be patient. I get to bear with. I get to learn how to forgive when they let me down, and they will. When I let you down, and I will. I'm going to quote Colleen Searcy from Friday night. This is what she said: "We are in danger of becoming content with having only distant mentors rather than up close and personal community." Does that sound familiar? You'd rather fill your life with podcasts, with YouTube preachers, with books that you can read all on your own. And this amazing content is better than anything Ty can produce. Yeah, I'm from Nebraska, right? Okay. But that's not community. It's education, and it's really important. But community is something different. And it's only when we enter into community that we can get kind of those rough edges knocked off. We can kind of learn and grow. It is the only place that we grow spiritually. And I'll say there's two places maybe that we grow spiritually: community and solitude. We're going to talk about solitude in a couple of weeks. Those are the two growth grounds for you and I. We go away, we bear our soul before God, we confess our sin, we come back, we engage, and that is where growth happens. Do you know that church attendance since the 1950s has been cut in half in the United States? In half. And I don't think it's just because we're going more secular. I think it's because we're going more individualistic. Anything that requires commitment is out the door. We just don't want to commit. We have the fear of missing out. Something better might come along, and so I want to keep my options open. The deal breaker is really commitment, right? I don't want to commit. So individualism. Second thing is idealism. This is what Dietrich Bonhoeffer said in just a great book that he wrote. I think it's called Life Together. The person who loves their dream of community will destroy community, but the person who loves those around them will create community. Isn't that good? Like there's this idealistic, like picture perfect community that I had when I was in college with my best friends, and we're all the same, we're all on the basketball team, and every Tuesday night we get together and we have the accountability group, and if we sinned in like these 10 categories, we put $1 in the jar, and like we spend hours praying, and then 4 of us would go downtown and we evangelize, 2 people would stay back and they'd pray all night long, and like, why can't Calvary be that for me? Right? So we had this idealistic picture of maybe a season in our life where something was so good. And it ruins community because we have this picture of what it could be, and it actually kills community. So loving the dream of what community could look like versus loving the people around you, you're either a killer or you're a community creator. I don't remember who said this, but I couldn't find it online, but I heard it somewhere. Community of your dreams is not the one that shapes you. The community of your dreams is not the one that shapes you. So if you're all the same, you never have any conflict, it's just so easy to be a part of this group, probably not being shaped and formed the way that you could be is if Bruce just said, you guys go together, right? Like we probably should do that. Like just assign you a small group because greater growth would happen in that group. I want to show you an example. Everybody got a piece of sandpaper on your way in, right? Hold up your sandpaper real quick if you got it. Okay, so I told the guest servants, there's like 3 different grits, by the way, and that's like how severe and how harsh the sandpaper is. I said, so as people are coming, you know them. People that are kind of soft, give them the 220 grit, but people that are rough, give them the 60 grit because they need it. And he handed me 60 grit. So the idea, I wanted you guys to have sandpaper because that's the idea of being shaped in community, right? So like just little by little by little, that's where the real growth happens. If you never have conflict, if you never have abrasive moments, like the shaping of your soul, the shaping of who you are as a person only happens in solitude and community. I really believe those are the 2 places. It will not happen in education. You can learn things, it'll protect your mind, protect your soul, but the shaping of your character to become like Jesus is inviting you, just as he invited the disciples, into a community that you do not get to select. And that's where the real growth happens. Some of you are not, everybody got one of these, but I brought this as an illustration. You've probably been dying to know what's under here. Some of y'all, right? Some of you guys take pride in being the one to call people out. Like we do not want power standards in our church. Look at those verses we just read. The ones that's on the back of the sandpaper says, with gentleness, with caring, considering what, so if you consider yourself this, you should ask someone if you are, by the way. Like you just come in and you just let people have it. I'm a truth teller. Okay. But do you love them? Do you care for them? Is really your intent to encourage them, to keep them? Or are you just coming in just ready to set them straight? We need truth tellers, but we also need grace. I would encourage you to think of the little piece of sandpaper, come in and bit by bit by bit by bit, sand something beautiful instead of coming in and just destroying community. I think the main reason that marriages fail is that we have wildly unrealistic expectations. And many of us make that mistake in community. We have this wildly unrealistic expectation for community. But it's just not reality, right? And so here's what it looks like for you. You wait around for that perfect community to kind of come, and it won't come. It just won't come. And so you're on the sideline, I want to be a part of a small group, but it has to be just right, or I can't be involved. Or you find yourself bouncing from small group to small group, or bouncing from church to church, because you just can't find what you're looking for. I would say that your expectations are unrealistic. The earliest followers of Jesus, the 12 apostles, they're fighting all the time. They didn't get to choose their team. They said, you guys are together. Murderer, thief. Why would we be any different? I think it would be an incredible experiment, and maybe y'all would leave the church if Bruce and Allison just started signing you, like, you guys go together. You guys go together. We don't know each other. Good. It's going to be good for your soul. The last reason, and probably the biggest reason, just intimidation. I think we're really scared of it. I think we're really scared of being exposed and really bearing our soul. We're afraid that people will, kind of know us. And I don't think it has anything to do with being an introvert or an extrovert, right? I'm an extrovert, and I was talking with John. I said, I'm going to talk about introverts again today, which I know nothing about, by the way. But introverts are some of the most non-lonely people I know. So they have figured out a way to connect deeply in relationship with people. I don't find introverts to be like percentage-wise lonelier. In fact, maybe extroverts are percentage-wise lonelier. They can walk in, connect with the crowd, but not in any kind of deep way, right? And so they can schmooze their way through a crowd, but there's no deep soul-bearing connection. The truth is that the introvert and the extrovert, we're all terrified because there's nowhere to hide if you really want to be an authentic community. And I think real community only happens when we are vulnerable and accountable. Like, I'm going to share my soul with you. I'm going to share my worst. Would you help me grow? Would you stand paper off the hard edges? Like, I need to stop doing this week. I need to start doing this week. Would you hold me accountable to that? That's where true community happens. When we're selective in what we share, we don't change. Like when we give the sanitized version, we share something kind of acceptable, but it's not really what I'm struggling with. I don't think that really transfers into authentic growth, authentic change. And I'll say this, and then I'm going to close because we're out of time. The center place for transformation, for spiritual transformation, I don't think is the pulpit. I think the center for transformation is the table. Like, if you really want to grow, I hope you enjoy these services. I hope you come and you learn. But if you really, really, really want to grow, the place for transformation is not the pulpit. I've had way more conversations at people's tables that are life transforming than I have from the pulpit. People tend to share the rightness of themselves and don't share the wrongness of themselves. And so when we selectively share, it doesn't do what it wants. So, all right, I need to stop. Two more things really quick. Write these down. There are two assumptions. There's two assumptions of the earliest followers of Jesus. This is what I'm going to close with, I promise. Two assumptions of the earliest followers of Jesus. Okay, you ready? Number one, the assumption that you are in community. Number two, the assumption that it is going to be messy. Read the New Testament. Like, forgive this person, bear with this person, like, help them, and when they offend you, all those things. The assumption is that you are in deep community and that it's going to be messy. The band's going to come, and here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to ask you all to stand. And someone challenged me to do it this week, and I did not want to do this, but I think it's going to be good for us. Graydon was the first one up. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to, either with someone around you or someone that you kind of know or maybe don't know, and if you're visiting this week and you don't know anybody here and you're like, this is really scary for me, just kind of like maybe cross your arms, say, don't talk to me, right? Like, get away. Like, that's okay. Say, no, I'm just going to pass, thanks. Like, even if you're an introvert, right? I got it in. Okay. I'm going to ask you to pray for one another this morning. Like, I know it's impossible. I think the limit is like 50 to 150 people, and we've got about 800 people in the room this morning. Like, it's impossible for you to know everybody in this room. But hopefully there's one or two people that you can take some steps with this week. Maybe the simple step is saying, I'm going to forgive this person. Maybe the simple step is I'm going to have someone over to my house, eat food with them, and I'm going to confess my sin to them. I've never done it before, but I know that this is where true growth happens. Maybe for you, it's like, I'm going to slow down a little bit this week. I'm going to start doing life with someone and kind of earn the right to hear what's going on in their life. Listen, we can't be a church of just services. And you guys already do this so well. But we can do even better. I think we can reach our city through community. I really do, community and hospitality. So I'm going to ask you to stretch yourself today. I'm going to ask you to pray a prayer of community in our church. that as the earliest disciples, as they followed Jesus, there was assumption they were in community and it was going to be messy. And can we pray those two things? That we would be in community and in the messiness that we would represent Christ well. Like, look at the gentleness of Christ. When the two were indignant and they were fighting about who was going to be great in the kingdom of God, he doesn't say, you guys are idiots. He doesn't, right? He comes in such a gentle way and say, hey, this is the way the world works. This is not how it works here. We come to serve and love one another. So I'm going to ask you to move and go pray, and then we're going to close with one song. Go ahead and do that.